Can you
Do
tell? Because I'm hearing you guys, but I can't see myself.
it's set up differently than a Zoom meeting, so you can't.
Okay, we will go ahead and get started in the interest of time. Mila's going to investigate the chat, but again, thank you all for being here. You are joining us for the Wednesday webinar, so there's money left to pay. You can utilize the Q&A feature right now. We're troubleshooting some chat functionality problems. You may be, if you're trying to chat with us and you're seeing chat has been disabled, that is what is going on. I am Maria McDougall. I'm one of the college access counselors, and monitoring your questions this afternoon, as well as sharing some links with you. Hopefully, if we can get the chat working, is Mila Tappan. And if we can't share the links during the session, I did send out an email ahead of time with a PDF of the presentation. I will send a follow-up email that will have everything you need, including links, particularly if we can't get the chat up and running. But thank you for joining us. We're gonna tackle a bunch of different things today, sort of about what happens during the time that we're currently in, of looking at aid offers, trying to navigate students through making the choice, how to cover what's left of a, after the financial aid comes through. We're going to talk about some things that we want students to keep in mind as they're going through this process, and then we'll have time for question and answer. But as I'm going through, if you have a question on something, please feel free to put that in the Q&A. I may stop periodically to just double check that we're not blazing too far ahead and gating over questions that folks might have in the Q&A or chat feature. I like to start with a brief kind of overview, a flow map, if you will, and the little stars are like students are here, right? So as far as the financial aid process goes, for those that aren't familiar with it or need a little refresher of kind of how the flow works, I like to start there just to kind of see, okay, where in the process are folks? So in order to begin the financial aid process, the student and generally a parent, when they're a dependent student, need to create the FSA ID. That's the username and password with federal student aid. And then they're completing the FAFSA. The FAFSA is annual. So you'll notice I've kind of put the time frame of each of these steps just so it's kind of clear the frequency of which things are happening. The FAFSA data was electronically sent to all the colleges that were listed on the application. And then this is kind of where we are now. So the school reviews the FAFSA and is sending offers of financial aid to the student. And the student and parents are in the compare aid offer cycle process. So imagine this little, like, if this is the map, you are here. So the early spring, a lot of schools got aid offers out kind of pretty early, starting, January, if there's early action scenarios, sometimes even December. But we're kind of in this, okay, we're starting to get the information from colleges, and students are trying to figure out where they're going to go and what it might look like to pay for that. I saw something come in the chat. So can we get someone to test out the chat for us? That would be great. Just to see if it works. You can send a question or just a hello. That would be lovely.
It says disabled. All right. So thanks everyone. Maria, I'll just interrupt very quickly.
Sure.
I changed the settings so that should allow it, but I'm wondering without restarting, we might not be able to.
Okay.
I'll try it one more time, but if not, we're just going to do everything in the Q&A. And like you said, we'll send the follow-up links.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
That
you all.
works.
Sorry about that.
We were saying just before we got started, the technology is great until it doesn't do what it's supposed to do. So thanks for bearing with us, everyone. So beyond the sort of compare and contrast part, after they've made the decision, they're going to complete requirements to receive the financial aid. There's a little bit of back and forth in terms of if the school needs to collect more information from the student, and then everything kind of shows up on the bill that the student will receive, and we're going to talk about that in a moment, to kind of figure out what their balance owed is and how they're going to resolve that balance. Just like to go over the flow of the process there. A couple of things just before bills arrive, because believe it or not, things are going to start happening really rapidly for seniors this spring. So if students haven't filed the FAFSA yet, if you're sitting there and you're someone who helps students and or you're a parent, you're like, oof, we didn't do that part yet. It is not too late. There are deadlines approaching. Every school has a priority FAFSA deadline. That's kind of a, some types of aid are first come, first serve. So that's why that's out there. It is not too late to file. We do recommend doing that as soon as possible. So just make sure that students are getting that very critical first piece done. They should also be finalizing paperwork. So they might be getting requests for verification, which is a process where the college may ask for additional documentation, such as copies of tax returns, W-2s, any additional forms that the college may have. They may need to be accepting financial aid as directed by the financial aid office when they've made a determination. And they should be checking their email and student portals regularly. I was just meeting with a student yesterday, in fact, there seemed to be some communication challenges, but also I had to remind him that even though he hasn't decided which college he's going to yet, he's got email addresses from each of the schools, and they very likely are communicating with him through the student email, and certainly information shows up on the school's portals, and we're going to talk about that a little bit as we go. So this is your spiel to remind your students to be good at checking email if they're not already. I have to say this to like my 16-year-old, because even his teachers in high school send him his information to his school email address, and he said, I didn't know. And I said, did you check your email? And he said, no. So we need to make sure that we're getting, and you're going to see why shortly, but schools really rely on that .edu email address to communicate important information with students. We want to make sure that they're double checking that, you know, what they've indicated is correct. So are they planning on being full-time or part-time? Do they have transfer credits? What are they thinking about in terms of housing? Just kind of thinking about all the details before receiving the bills to make sure that they are going to be able to build for what they think they'll be billed for. Couple of things just to look at on a bill. Some of you may have seen these, received them yourself or for your children, or helping students through the process, but just a couple of critical pieces. There's usually a due date, and it's generally kind of, you know, first day of classes, but ideally, you know, sometimes the students can't move in until the bill is paid. So they're going to tell you when they want sort of the bill plan to be made. There might be housing charges. Are they in line with what you thought in terms of the type of residence hall or meal plan? Are there any charges, late fees that the student or family doesn't understand that they maybe want to ask about? What did anything come with the bill? So was there additional information? I know I've worked at a couple of different places, and there was like a worksheet attached to the paper bill of like, okay, so this is your balance. Tell us how you're going to pay that, right? So looking for those inserts so that the student financial services office or the billing office at the university will understand, you know, has presented the options, and will then hear from the student about how they plan to pay that bill. So just kind of looking for all of those specific details as they're building their plans. There are some things in the bill that might be able to be changed or removed. Health insurance is the biggie. It is generally mandatory that students have some kind of health insurance coverage. If they can be covered by their parents' insurance, and this can vary school to school, but if their parents find, you know, health insurance can cover them, there's usually a process. It's often a website where you go in and put the student's insurance card information that can be waived and taken off the bill. But it's an opt-out, not an opt-in. So make sure students are looking for that health insurance, and if they're covered, that they're taking that off, because it can be fairly costly. There might be charges related to parking and things that could be changed or waived. Expensive meal plans, you know, there is often flexibility in terms of how you're choosing housing or meal plan. Is there, you know, does all that match up? Is there a way to reduce those expenses? And just asking questions about the fees. There's, you know, things like activity fees or whatever the various things might be called. You know, materials and labs fees are pretty self-explanatory, but if there's something that feels like unclear, make sure that the students are asking about that. They might receive one paper bill only. So as I said, it might be a packet of information with how to pay and different other supplemental information. but generally they're gonna refer students to whatever the student portal is, and that's usually a pretty close to real-time 24/7 access of the students' billing information. So encourage them to activate things like Main Street or whatever the school portal is for crucial billing information. The financial aid that they have, if they've accepted everything and done all those pieces, some of it could show as pending. Disbursement generally can't happen. I think it's 10 days before the start of classes is I think the very earliest. So they might see some types as pending, or it might, if they don't see anything pending, it might be that they're missing pieces of financial aid steps that they should have done. So confirming all of that is really important. And then payment arrangements, we'll talk about the different ways to do that. Generally must be made before first day of classes or move-in day, so that everything is ready to go on day one. And just a reminder that students are required to report all outside scholarships to the financial aid office and be prepared to sign scholarship checks on campus if they're required. So some agencies for scholarships will send a paper check to the school for the student to sign over to the university. So just a couple of quick reminders there. I don't see anything in the Q&A, so I'm gonna keep going. So one of the things we tell families a lot, and we're doing a lot of this sort of comparing the aid offers process right now with families, is really diving into the numbers. It's really difficult to take a look at an offer of financial aid and even the cost on the website and just sort of make a determination. And some aid offer sessions, and if you joined us at our last session, which was on financial aid offers, you would have seen, you know, they all kind of look different, and some of them might have an estimated remaining balance on them, some might not. So it's really important to kind of do the math to figure out what that bottom line is, and then also make the plan. So we have a worksheet that can help with this. The first half of it, we will send the link for this. It is available in the resources section on our website. The first half is kind of a way to side-by-side compare financial aid offers. And then the second half of the worksheet says, okay, if we're gonna, let's figure out what the plan is. Let's take the numbers and calculate that and figure out if we were gonna lay out a plan, what would that look like? Okay, so it's really important to do the math. You're certainly not required to pitch our worksheet as the option for doing this only. I've seen really cool Excel spreadsheets, and some people are just very much pen and paper folks and want to do that. But certainly it's important to help students actually calculate the numbers. I think also that kind of helps the reality of the situation set in a little bit. I saw the chat number go up. Do we think it's working? Is that okay? Myla did put a link in there, so it looks like maybe.
Yep, I believe it's
working.
fixed.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe it's fixed. So
Great.
let me know if not in the Q&A, but I think it's working.
Excellent. Thank you for fixing that. So again, this is our fillable calculating the cost worksheet. Myla's sticking their eyes sort of like it kind of does the math for you, but this is able to be downloaded, shared on your website. So your school counseling website, you can email it to families. They can come to our website and utilize it. It's a really great resource, because especially that second half that says, okay, if we're gonna talk about sort of building the plan together, but it shows all of those possible pieces for paying the bill. You can see you just put in the information and it does the math. I like to share this graph when we're having this conversation. I actually have shared this with specific families, because I think sometimes when the bills come out, the number is a little bit shocking and people go, well, does anybody just like pay for this, write a check? And certainly there are folks that do that, but it's a patchwork quilt. It's a little from column A, it's a little from column B, and you'll see there in the pie chart kind of the breakdown of how students and families pay for education. And that's from a Sally Mae report. So this was from 21-22. You know, a big chunk is parent income and student savings, scholarships and grants, borrowed money, and then, you know, a tiny piece of the pie, relative and friends, people kind of contributing to the effort. There isn't a right or wrong way, or even just one way to cover the bill. Again, it's a piecemeal approach, and the billing office really just wants to make sure that that bill is going to get paid. They don't necessarily care which pieces you use to get there. Okay, so just like to share that so that most folks know that there's likely to be very few people just paying the bill flat out without pulling from different parts of the possible ways to pay. We do encourage students to maximize free money wherever possible. So encourage them to keep looking for scholarships spring of senior year. So this sort of March, April, May timeframe is peak time for scholarship applications to be due. We have our scholarship search database, family.com/scholarships. And we also have a listing there of some of the national sites that we put out there that we've taken a look at. The college financial aid offices is a great place to look. They might have a set of endowed scholarships that's like a general scholarship app that students don't want to miss out on. But also they might have major specific types of scholarships, those sorts of things. The local organizations, social media, any sort of free online scholarship search. Actually discovered Pinterest has a whole bunch of curated boards for scholarships based on topic or when they're due, which was a thing I accidentally discovered while I was looking for something else. So we really just want to keep that momentum going. And I like to think of scholarship searching as a habit. So just kind of something they're always thinking about doing, building in time for it on the calendar. I know there's a lot of other things going on, but all of that, free money is potentially dollars that don't have to be borrowed and repaid with interest. So we want to keep that momentum going. And I know you all do a fantastic job with encouraging that for your students. Again, checking in with the financial aid office to find out if there's other scholarships. Has anything changed in their financial situation? So, the process kind of spans a long time. So they did the FAFSA potentially last October. Things have changed. There was a pandemic. Maybe there's a change in the family's ability to pay. We do have, and if you as their school counselor support person, advocate, know that something in their circumstances have changed, certainly encourage them to follow up with the financial aid office. We have our steps to appeal a financial aid offer worksheet that just kind of breaks down things to consider, things to put in a letter that you're going to write to the financial aid office, all of that. I'm always on the camp of like, it can't hurt to ask. There are, things that the financial aid office can take into consideration or exclude from calculations. It's always better to find out if that's possible. So do encourage them to kind of take that step, especially if you, as someone who's working closely with them, know that their circumstances might have changed. Because sometimes the FAFSA, it's looking 2 tax years back, and then parts of it are a snapshot of the day they did it, and a lot can change between then and now. So just encourage them to do that follow-up with the financial aid office. They also should be notifying the financial aid office if they have outside scholarships. They want to, make sure that they're also reporting to the agency, if they need to show a copy of their bill or their aid offer, but also the reverse is true. So if there does need to be any adjustments, that can be done ahead of time. It's, again, we get this question every time, I heard if they get too many scholarships, it changes their financial aid eligibility. We're never going to discourage students from applying for scholarships. Generally, there's a gap in the amount of need that can be covered for students, and scholarships can fill that. If you're concerned that there might need to be an adjustment to financial aid, you can certainly, if they get a really big scholarship or a whole bunch of small ones and you just want to talk about the impact of that, absolutely a question for the financial aid office, but they are obligated to notify them, and doing so proactively is helpful, because you don't want changes to happen on the back end that can feel more confusing. Are there questions so far on any of this?
Nope, I don't have any questions so far. So please go ahead. If you do have questions, just drop them in the chat, because I think you're able to now, or ask them in the Q&A, whichever is more convenient for you.
I want to highlight a couple of scholarship programs here, just so that folks are kind of aware of these things as you're, as school counselors and support people. And I know we have at least one parent with us this afternoon. You're always hunting for opportunities to share scholarship information with students. So a reminder about the competitive skills scholarship program. This one is particular to degrees or credentials in high wage, in demand occupations. There's some qualifiers there, but it's a really great scholarship program that encourages people to get credentials of value and really in demand jobs in Maine. And I think everybody sort of feels like every job's in demand in Maine right now, right? There's lots of places hiring, but just like to highlight that one. Mila's going to put the link for that one in the chat as well. Of course, we would be remiss if we didn't mention the Maine Community Foundation. They have a whole bunch of different scholarships available as well. And a lot of these are endowed or donor-based, regional specific. So some of them are very much like from a particular county or even down to a particular high school. Some of those niche, smaller ones that might have fewer applicants, and then the chances go up of earning those. Maine Community Foundation also has the Adult Learner Scholarship. I sit on that committee, so I just want to mention it for those of you working with adult learners. That application is also available at the Maine Community Foundation under scholarships, and it says for adult learners. They have the standard adult learner one, as well as others that are geared towards adults returning or starting college for the first time. We also have to mention the Worthington Scholarship, which is a great option, as well as Mitchell Scholarship. These are your school counseling office can point you in the right direction for these, but great opportunities to earn some real scholarship dollars and mentorship, and they're renewable. And it's a really, I think the application is pretty short for both of them to fill out. So we want to just make sure that we are encouraging students to do that. There's a list of participating high schools and colleges on the Worthington website. I think these, are really great opportunities for Maine students. And I just talked with a Worthington student actually recently who just was like not going to be able to go to school without it. So we wanted to highlight those for you. And then this one is a little bit different in terms of qualifiers, because it generally might be adult learners, but certainly not always the case. The HOPE program, which is Higher Opportunity for Pathways to Employment, which generally the baseline qualifier is that the student has a dependent child. So they are, and that can be unborn at the time that they're enrolling in the program. So I just like to make that, I like to put that out there as well. And then there's Parents as Scholars, which is for people who are on TANF. So if these programs, if you know students who might fit, I happen to know that there are lots of slots available for these programs. They are constantly looking for people to take advantage of these funds. So if you know parents who are looking to return to school or start for the first time, those links will be available as well. Great opportunity, and both of them are kind of wraparound, so it's not just tuition and fee support, but things like childcare and transportation. So they're kind of wraparound programs that can really help parents who are students succeed academically. We also encourage families to leverage as much sort of cash as they can, right? As much from savings as possible to reduce the amount and reliance on borrowing. We're hoping that families are utilizing college savings if they have any. So if that specific types of accounts like the Next Gen 529 or Coverdell's, things specifically earmarked for college, maybe it's gifts from family. I always encourage people to like take the graduation money or the summer income money and tuck it away for school. Just as a reminder, like if you know students are going to be working this summer, hey, don't forget to put some of that aside, even for things like textbooks, which are what we call a planned out-of-pocket expense in the financial aid world, meaning you got to show up and have the books ready to go. So we just want families to leverage as much as they can from that. And one way to do that is, we'll talk in a minute about payment plans, but kind of taking money that's available through savings or just changing over what you're paying for. So we talk a lot about like, I'm paying for daycare right now. And at some point when I'm done doing that, I might still try to put that money that is already coming out of my budget into her college savings fund, right? So just thinking about ways to leverage income and savings as much as possible to reduce the reliance on debt. It might also be worth it to have families and students leverage employer tuition assistance. A whole bunch of companies are kind of jumping on the tuition assistance bandwagon because it's a great recruiting recruiting tool. McDonald's, it's like day one part-time, you can get tuition assistance. We have a list on our website. Mila, I might have forgot to put this one in your link, so sorry. That offer tuition assistance. It's not an exhaustive list by any stretch, but it is, it does kind of give a little rundown, and we'll take you directly to the page where you can find more information, so students can check and see if their employers are on that. I also like to have students and their families ask their employer anyway, even if they're not on the list, because maybe asking the question will make them say, well, we don't, but maybe we should, right? So consider offering a scholarship or some kind of tuition assistance, but that can be another way to offset the cost of college. One more of the pieces that can be put together. Most colleges offer a tuition payment plan. So it could be, you could finance some or all of the total balance with interest-free monthly payments. There's generally a small enrollment fee to sign up for that. But it's just a way to kind of finance a portion or all of the remaining balance in a more digestible monthly payment. And of course, enrolling in that early. So making that plan and figuring out if that's one of the pieces might mean that you can stretch that out over more months of the academic year. So, that's another, when we talk about leveraging available income, this is kind of what we're talking about. So is there room in the household budget to finance some of it using the tuition payment plan? Along with that is, if borrowing is a reality, and for many families it is, we want to encourage students and their families to borrow responsibly. There's lots of news on student loans, right? Lots of information to consider. We do generally recommend that they're accepting the federal direct student loans first. So if the student's done the FAFSA, they should be seeing an offer of direct student loan. Might be subsidized, unsubsidized, or both if they're eligible. We generally recommend doing that first. That's a loan in the student's name. There's no credit check. There's no cosigner. There are limits on the annual amount that the student can borrow, and of course, lifetime limits overall. It's also a great way for students to build credit after graduation without credit cards, which I like to pitch at parents too, because I think that makes them feel a little bit better about the whole process, and tons of income-based repayment options, as well as things like public service loan forgiveness. So if borrowing is part of the equation, certainly talk through it with students and families, but just thinking about using the direct student loans first. And then another thing to think about in terms of numbers is really doing the calculation. Like, okay, if you're going to borrow this, especially if maybe they're at a college that feels like a real financial stretch in terms of the family's ability to kind of cobble these pieces together, it might be worth it to take a look at the starting salary of the field that they're interested in. So at Career One Stop, they can plug in down to the zip code. I'm going to work in Augusta, Maine in this field. What is my, what's the average starting salary? And then go to the FAME salary and debt calculator, plug that in and see, okay, what salary do I need to make to manage this level of debt, and vice versa. Sometimes these numbers are very shocking to students. They're like, wait, I have to make $700 an hour to cover that amount of debt that I have. So it's a good way to kind of set expectations early, particularly if borrowing even beyond the federal direct student loans needs to be part of the equation. So really doing some of that real talk math with students can make a big difference in terms of A, making a decision on the front end, and B, figuring out the plan to pay. Research has to be part of the process. So if borrowing beyond those federal loans is part of the equation, there's multiple options that families have to do that. Nothing if not an educational institution at FAME, so we want to make sure students and families are making whatever the right decision is for them. On our website, there's a whole section on borrowing, and it does include the ability to side-by-side compare Maine-based banks and lenders, including FAME, the Maine loan through FAME, other banks and lending institutions. So you can kind of see what the interest rates are, fees, terms, all of that, to make a decision that works best for families. And then also considering kind of who's doing the bulk of the borrowing, right? So generally those private education loans are in the student's name, but if students don't have credit, they require a credit worthy cosigner. Doesn't have to be a parent, but generally might be in most cases. There's some families that the parent is willing to take on everything. So they might do a parent plus loan, or there are some private loans. Sally Mae has a private loan for parents. So part of the conversation is, okay, who's gonna kind of be on the dotted line for borrowing beyond that federal loan, and then thinking about the affordability of those options and deciding which direction to go in. So if borrowing is part of the process, make sure that they're spending time learning about the different options and considerations when doing that kind of borrowing, and having the conversation as a family about who's going to be on the hook for what and how are we going to make this work. And then literally putting the plan in place. I think I'm a big fan of I want to see it. Let's put it in writing. Let's figure out what this looks like. So when we're doing at FAME, one-on-ones with families about, okay, we kind of made the decision. Now we figure out how we're going to pay for it. We walk through this form with them and we say, okay, we're going to take a little bit from savings, and we're going to take a little bit from, we got some outside scholarships. There might be some money in the summer. And then it's okay, what are the other little pieces that we're going to put through to make this work? And then I have families take that and multiply by the number of years that the student is going to be in school. So beyond the first year, sometimes it might feel like a little bit of a financial stretch, but I'll hear from families it's okay, we can make it work, we'll do that. And then it's not a sustainable plan long-term. So the student's attending a 4-year institution, and is that same plan, assuming costs don't change or even, more likely go up, is this a sustainable plan? So just kind of walking through the raw numbers, I think, can help that make sense. And then they've got a document that says, okay, this is how we're going to do it. And they can translate that to whatever the paperwork is for the student's billing office, or just kind of as a reminder to themselves, hey, we've all committed to doing these pieces to get that bill paid. We want to encourage as much saving as possible. And again, thinking long term. So is it a sustainable plan? Can they make it, I know Mila's had these conversations too. We all have of the family that sort of made it work for 1 year. And then we've got the sophomore student contacting us to say oh, what am I going to do? Because I don't know how to make it, my parents can't sign on a loan for another year or that sort of thing. And so just thinking about now as we're making these plans, is that a sustainable plan for the duration of the program? And just another reminder that if they do get a refund, so sometimes what happens is funds come in, they cover the billable cost, tuition fees, maybe room and board if that works. If it's student loan eligibility that generates that overpayment, that credit to the student, we highly recommend that it's in their best interest to have those funds returned to the lender to reduce their debt. I know some schools do that kind of automatically if that's the case. We always want students to be reducing debt first whenever that's the option. And just to give, have students make sure that they've got multiple options. So, okay, if the plan is we fill out that worksheet and it's maybe something we could do for 1 year, but putting it in place for multiple years would be a stretch. Okay, what's plan? What if we did this school instead? How would we plan out that? What would that look like? Is that sustainable? That's why we generally encourage students to put at least 2 colleges on their FAFSA. More is better in terms of having options for attending. And then also considering community college for the classes of 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023. Means community colleges are free, but I do want to point out that even before the Free Community College Initiative, a student that had a 0 EFC and received a full Pell Grant and full State of Maine grant, tuition fees was covered anyway at our amazing affordable community colleges. So just something to think about in terms of, okay, what's plan A, B, and C? If sort of the number one dream school is a little bit of a financial stretch, and then having that conversation to kind of figure out who's doing what's plan B, I think will ease some of the tension in terms of paying the balance. I don't see anything in the Q&A. I know the chat has some stuff.
Yep.
Mila's links. I'd love to
Yep, Maria,
leave the
can
rest of the time for questions.
Maria, can you talk a little bit more about PLUS loans? We had a request for a little bit more information about PLUS.
Yes, I just saw that. I was heading to that slide. That's a great question. A Parent Plus loan is a type of federal loan that, so it's a federal direct loan, but it's in the parent's name versus the student's name. They've been around quite a while. It is a fixed interest rate type of loan. It's generally higher than what the students are going to see on their direct loans in their name, the subsidized and unsubsidized. The difference in terms of, besides the fact that it's just in the private loans are generally in the student's name, is that oftentimes the parent loan is a little bit easier to get, the Parent Plus loan, because they're, in terms of, there's a credit check process for that, but they're mostly looking for like adverse credit history. So the credit requirements tend to be a little bit different. There's also an appeals process. So if a parent is denied, they can appeal the credit denial, or if they are denied, the student can get a subsidized direct loan. So sometimes families go that route, like especially if they think they're going to get denied. And so it's just another type of option. But the real key is that loan is exclusively in the parent's name versus a private education loan that would be in the student's name that the parent might co-sign for.
Maria, can I just add a couple points to
Sure.
that?
Yeah.
So the plus loan, normally I wouldn't say we discourage, but to be honest, I do. Because it's an expensive loan. There's a fee that gets taken out up front, which is over 4%. So that money's just gone off the top. And typically the interest rate, which is fixed, it's done 1 year at a time. It's determined, the rate is determined usually in May of each year. The rate has been high compared to other types of loans. That being said, the rate for the plus loan that's in existence currently was set a while ago. So it's at 7.5%. So that's not a bad fixed rate right now. So, a year ago, I would have said, no way should someone do a plus loan if they have other options, because it's so much more expensive. But for this window, until that plus loan rate adjusts, it actually might be something that families would want to consider if, as Maria said, the parents are willing to do the borrowing themselves.
And that's why we do want to encourage, with having the family conversation, right? So like, what is, are these private loans maybe more affordable based on the terms and credit worthiness? That, beyond just who's going to do what, but what's long-term going to save us the most money? I just saw another question pop up, I think. Possible to transfer an existing Parent Plus loan from one parent to the other if parents are divorced?
Yeah, so I was just going to answer that in the chat, Maria, but I can jump in if you want me to and just.
Yeah, I think that's a great, if you want to tackle that one, I'm happy to let you.
So you cannot transfer a plus loan. So transferring, whether it's from parent to parent, or what we actually get asked a lot is transferring from parent to student. Yeah. None of that is possible. Now, that being said, there are some programs where you can refinance loans. So there are lenders, it would mean it's no longer a federal loan with all of the federal benefits that exist, but it is possible to take out an education loan that is a consolidation loan, a refinance loan. And so that could pay off the underlying loans. And then they're going to be in the name of whoever you desire. Those types of loans do typically require, though, that the person who is borrowing them be credit worthy so that they can pass both the debt to income ratio as well as have sufficient credit. So it's not as simple as one might hope when that situation exists, which you just mentioned, which is, when the parents divorce.
Yeah, and there is information also on the refinancing just in general on that same section of our website about borrowing. So if you're, just for curiosity's sake, but also just as Mila touched on a little bit, I had a friend who consolidated all of his federal loans that were in his name into a private education loan, and then of course couldn't take advantage of any of the federal benefits, including the pandemic pause, which we're in the middle of still. So just if you're looking for refinancing, we've got lots of really good information on our website about things to consider if you're going to do that.
Maria, I did just have a question about the Worthington Scholarship that just came directly to us.
Yep.
I do think it's worth mentioning. So the Worthington Scholarship actually started in the Rockland area. So I think originally Oceanside High School might have been the only school that was eligible.
I think you're
And
right.
what they're doing slowly but surely, it's an absolutely amazing program, is they are expanding to additional counties.
Mhm.
Currently, there are, I believe, and I'm doing this off my memory, so forgive me if I'm wrong, but we can confirm on the website. There are 4 counties that are not eligible: Cumberland, York, Androscoggin, and I believe there's one other. So it's the southern part of the state. The intention, my understanding from the Worthington Foundation, is they do hope to be statewide. They're just kind of expanding a little bit at a time. But actually it's happening pretty quickly. So hold tight for those of you in the southern part of the state. I do think you'll have some good news coming your way in the not too distant future, but for right now, there are a few counties where it's not available.
That's a great point, Mila. I think, and you're right that I do remember it was Rockland, that started it. And so, it's certainly come, we got 16 counties, we've got almost all of them. So it's really come a long way. Any other questions? Comments, concerns, especially if you are knee deep in this as a parent yourself, perhaps, or I'm also curious about trends that people are seeing, with aid offers or anything like that. So anything you want to offer to us would be great. Otherwise, we will wrap up. We have tons of information on our website. You or your students can reach out to us anytime. Education@faymain.com is a great get questions answered. They'll triage it up the ladder if they can't help themselves, although our customer service team is certainly wonderful. I will send out, we got the chat working, but I will also send out a link to the recording, a PDF of the sessions, as well as some of those links, especially for the scholarship stuff, just to make sure that you have those available. Thank you so much for joining us. I will hang out a little bit just in case there's any last minute questions. You can chat to myself and Mila directly if you don't want it to be in the chat Q&A. Otherwise, thank you and have a great day.
And if you're still here related to the Worthington, I just look it up. And there are actually only 3 counties that are not currently participating: York, Androscoggin, and Cumberland. So if you're in one of the others, go for it and make sure that students are applying. It's a great program.